This video is for anyone wondering if they should learn French in France or with a French government subsidized language school. My name is Chris, I'm a French teacher who lives in real reality. I have a real business with a real language school. What I'm about to say is based on real experience, real knowledge. I'm not a YouTuber, I live in real reality, and you can really find me if you were ever interested in French classes. I'm here to expose you to a grave danger, otherwise known as FLE French, Français Langue Étrangère, FLE French, the gold standard of French teaching made in France. Let me tell you straight away what the issue is. FLE French, when you take French classes taught in the style of FLE French classes teach you a second language, because French is a second language for yourself. They teach you a second language the way French people already think. So what they're doing is they're teaching you French as a second language in the manner of a first language. And I invite you all to type in your favorite fact-checking device, ChatGPT, Gemini, Google, your local wise woman, your local clairvoyant, to see if what I'm saying makes sense. You type the question, ask the question, frequent criticisms of FLE teaching, FLE, and you'll get answers along the lines of what I'm about to say. But I'm going to go further because I have a vantage point that very few people ever get, because I'm what you call a pure bilingual. So I speak English and French as a native. I teach English also. I teach French, and I know the cultures of France, the UK, the USA as an insider. The problem, as I briefly mentioned, is that FLE French is France's way of teaching French to foreigners. The main accusation is that they teach a second language as if every student was already a speaker of French. The rules make sense to the French, likely not to yourself. The levels like A1, A2, B1, B2 make sense to them. And of course there's rather a lot of scamming going on, let's be honest, because you end up paying much more when you fail their tests, because then you have to enroll in a new test. You pay for the classes, fail the test, enroll, etc. Just look up the information, it's all over the internet. FLE French is rigid, it's expensive, I find it completely inefficient and outdated. And yes, I did work for French language schools, so I have a fair idea of what goes on there. Now let's talk about you. If you're a native speaker of English, you have your own way of learning. So you come from a different school system. The school system in the English-speaking tradition is a lot less academic, it's more intuitive, and you have different expectations. This, of course, clashes with the French teaching system from day one. Does the average French teacher know what goes on in the UK, the USA, Australia, Ireland? Well, likely not. Why would they? So right from the start, you're sort of swimming against the current, because here you are with one academic tradition in your mind, and now you're learning French in the way of a French person, of a French teacher, in a way that makes sense to them. So you have a clash of two school systems. The second thing is that your linguistic highway code, your language highway code, anything about language that makes sense to you in your mind, might be English, if you're a native speaker of English listening to me now. This language, of course, has its own logic, of which only a small, miniature fraction is ever taught to French pupils in high schools. French students learn English words. That's sort of the best they achieve. They learn English words. Based on this, can they read into you? Can they read into you as a native speaker of English? Do they understand how your mind works, how you feel about language on a subconscious level? Do you think so? And if you don't get what I'm on about, don't worry, because very few people can. You have to be a bilingual to realize what it's like to have a foot in two universes. Very few people can actually know as an insider what I'm talking about. Think of a platypus, that strange animal that swims, looks a bit like a duck, a bit like an otter, a bit like something else, a platypus. Well, a platypus, if it could talk, if it had a consciousness, a platypus knows what it feels like to be a duck and a beaver, right? So a platypus technically knows what it feels like to be a duck because it has a beak and a beaver, but it doesn't know what it feels like to be a cow. because it doesn't look like a cow. It's never been a cow. It can be a duck, it can be a beaver, it can't be a cow. That's what bilinguals do, okay? They have a foot in two universes, sometimes three, very rarely. So they know very well what it feels like to be two things and not one thing. If you're born with two languages in two cultures, you can't quite explain what it's like. You feel it, you know it, as an insider. A platypus could potentially teach beavers and ducks very well because it has a foot in both universes. But it can't also teach cows very well because it has no idea what it's like to be a cow. And this is the core of my argument. And also the platypus realizes this truth a lot better than teachers who are monolingual or just have one native language. It realizes, wow, I really have a foot in two universes. This is unique. I can really feel what it's like to be a duck. I can really feel what it's like to be a beaver. I can feel what it's like to be an English speaker or a French speaker, a native French speaker who's not also a native speaker of English, Japanese, Indian, you name them, can't ever really feel what it's like, such as FLE teachers. This truth is known to very, very few people because there aren't many human platypuses around. Another thing, which you won't hear anywhere else, is that French teachers, between you and I, French teachers have a very, very bad understanding of their own Frenchness. And it seems an odd thing to say, isn't it? What do you mean they don't understand their own Frenchness? I'll explain what it means. It means that they've lived in a social aquarium called France, which is by definition monolingual with a vengeance. They've been French all their life. They don't quite realise what it means to be French. I mean, they're drowned in Frenchness. They swim in Frenchness. How could they ever know what it feels like, what it means to be French or to not be French? When you study FLE French, you'll see that even in a beginner's course, you'll have tons of expressions, cultural references that will constantly act as an obstacle to your learning. It will constantly get in the way of understanding the main part. For example, you want to learn the present tense, well, the present tense will be littered with expressions and cultural references that get in your way of learning the main thing. And why does this happen? Because the people who design these French courses have a very, very, very poor understanding of their own Frenchness. Let's go with a typical sentence that you might see in an A1 class, A1 meaning beginner. You might see a sentence along the lines of "Chaque matin, Élodie se lève de bonne heure," and blah blah blah. The story goes on. Chaque matin, Élodie se lève de bonne heure. And it seems very inclusive. It seems to make a lot of sense. Okay, well, you know, low level story takes place in the morning. Okay, I can relate to that. But then you have de bonne heure. Why on earth did they place de bonne heure in the sentence? What does it even mean? It means what? Of good hour? She wakes up of good hour. Elle se lève de bonne heure. And then the next question is, well, when do I use this? Do people actually speak while using de bonne heure? Is it literary? Is it usual to say de bonne heure? Do people actually speak like this? And why on earth did they place that in the sentence? In this same sentence, you also have a reflexive verb thrown in. Elle se lève, so she wakes her own self up. It could also mean stand up, which is a bit confusing. Elle se lève, wake up or stand up. It sort of lacks all context. What are these reflexive verbs? How many are there? Is it a big part of the French curriculum? What am I supposed to remember? Je me lève, tu te lèves, il se lève. How many more are there? And you can multiply this problem by 1,000. Easily. At every moment you'll encounter the same problem, because there's going to be a similar problem all over your beginner's course, all over your intermediate course. There's going to be a lot of friction, a lot of expressions that the French themselves don't rationalize. And why does it happen? I've said it before, because the French course designers and teachers have a very, very poor understanding of their own Frenchness. How could they understand their own Frenchness? They were born in this social aquarium, I've mentioned it, they were born in this social aquarium called France, and they follow a certain very, very French tradition that you'll find in teaching also. So this just about concludes this video on FLE French. I'm going to go off script for a second. I've known France for 4 decades. The way they'll teach you French as a second language will be thoroughly French, suited to their own logic, and at every step it's going to be an unnecessary obstacle. And I can well imagine how it might seem contradictory to anyone who doesn't know France as an insider. And it can be very hard for you to understand, because if I were to go to Finland or Japan, and I learnt that, Finland and Japan have a government program to teach you, what's the language, Finnish or Japanese, I'd think, well, they surely know their stuff. I mean, they've been doing it long enough, haven't they? They can probably teach me Finnish, and I hear that there's a free government program. But then what I don't see as an outsider is the internal problems linked to a certain culture. Because for all I know, Japan is very watertight and turned inwards and very traditional, and they can't seem to see outside of their own Japaneseness. And you'd have to be an insider to be able to explain this to someone, and hopefully I've exposed my point of view clearly enough. I don't think it's even a point of view, I think it's just a fact at this stage. I don't know if it's a law, it's at least a theory. I don't quite know if it's a law. But anyway, it might save you a lot of time, money, frustration. Think twice about FLE French. I don't think it's going to work very well for you. My name is Chris. I teach French to native speakers of English. Find me at wecommunicate.com. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe. See you soon.